Everything you think you know about the Black Sea, that deep, dark expanse of water stretching between Europe and Asia, is profoundly wrong. It was not always a sea. For millennia, it was a colossal freshwater lake, a pristine inland world, where an unknown civilization may have thrived on its generous, fertile shores. This isn't just a geological curiosity. It's a forgotten chapter of human history, a mystery hidden beneath the waves for thousands of years. Imagine, if you will, a different Black Sea, not the saltwater body we know today, but a colossal, isolated freshwater haven, perhaps the largest of its kind on Earth, a place that once hummed with life, a cradle for human development, before vanishing beneath a deluge of salt water. Tonight, we will journey into this forgotten past, exploring a mystery that challenges our understanding of ancient history, human resilience, and the very ground beneath our feet. So, dim the lights, find your most comfortable spot, and let your mind drift with the currents of time as we unveil the impossible truth of the Black Sea, a lost world, patiently waiting to be revealed. Deep beneath the rolling waves of the modern Black Sea, far from the bustling ports and tourist beaches, lies a geological secret, a mystery so profound, it redefines the very identity of this iconic body of water. For generations, we have learned about the Black Sea as it is, a landlocked saltwater basin, a maritime crossroads, a familiar fixture on our maps. Its depths, famously it knocks it below a certain level, guard their secrets fiercely, preserving relics in a cold, dark embrace. But what if those secrets tell a story not of stagnation, but of radical transformation? A story of a thriving ecosystem, utterly swallowed by catastrophe, its memory erased from all but the deepest geological records. This isn't merely a shift in water salinity. It's a tale of an entire landscape, a vast territory that literally disappeared beneath the water, taking with it whatever existed there. Our conventional maps, our school textbooks, and our everyday understanding present the Black Sea as a relatively stable geographical feature. A sea, much like any other, albeit one with unique ecological characteristics and strategic importance. Geologists have long studied its formation, its currents, and the layers of sediment that have accumulated over vast epochs. The prevailing narrative has largely centered on its current state, its connection or lack thereof to the wider oceans, and its slow, almost imperceptible changes over thousands of years. We perceive it as a constant, a known quantity, a body of water whose history has been long and gradual, uninterrupted by sudden, earth-shattering events of scale that could reshape human settlement. The idea of such a dramatic transformation and the implications it holds for humanity has simply not been a prominent part of mainstream historical discourse. The current understanding offers little room for a lost continent or a drowned human world beneath its familiar blue surface. But recent scientific discoveries, particularly from daring deep-sea expeditions mounted over the last few decades, have forced a dramatic reevaluation of this long-held view. The evidence, painstakingly gathered from core samples extracted from the seafloor, sophisticated sonar mapping revealing submerged coastlines, and even accidental underwater archaeological surveys, paints a profoundly different picture. It suggests that the Black Sea we know today is not the sea that existed for much of human prehistory. Instead, it was something entirely, unbelievably different, a monumental freshwater lake, cut off from the global oceans for an immense span of time. This isn't just a theoretical model. It's a conclusion drawn from concrete data, from the very chemistry of the sediments, from the ancient flora and fauna trapped in time beneath the deep, cold waters. The story written in the geological layers of the Black Sea contradicts centuries of assumption. Some pioneering researchers, led by oceanographers like William Ryan and Walter Pittman, now propose a radical hypothesis that for thousands of years, spanning the last ice age and extending well into the early Holocene epoch, the Black Sea was not a sea at all, but a vast, pristine freshwater lake. Imagine this colossal inland lake, perhaps a third smaller than the current sea, but still immense, its surface shimmering under an ancient sun. It was fed by powerful glacial rivers like the Danube, the Dnieper, and the Don, which flowed freely into its basin, with no outlet to the Mediterranean. Its shores, wide, fertile, and lush, would have stretched for thousands of miles, providing an incredibly rich and stable environment for early human communities. The water, fresh and teeming with a unique array of fish and other aquatic life, with a supported diverse flora and fauna along its banks, creating an ecological paradise. This theory suggests that the land now submerged beneath hundreds of feet of salt water was once a vast, exposed plain, a haven of biodiversity and human habitation. Could this have been home to advanced Stone Age cultures, perhaps even early Bronze Age settlements, thriving on the abundant resources of this ancient freshwater oasis? The idea challenges our very conception of ancient European and Near Eastern geography, suggesting a vibrant, populous region where we now see only empty sea. The thought of an entire civilization, or at least a highly developed network of sophisticated settlements, living on the shores of this colossal lake, resonates with profound possibilities. What kind of structures did they build in this unique landscape? What were their lives like, adapted to the rhythms of such a grand, freshwater inland sea? Did they develop unique technologies or social structures adapted to this environment, perhaps mastering freshwater navigation and fishing techniques? Some theories suggest that these communities would have been strategically positioned around the lake's receding and advancing shoreline, evolving with its natural changes. They would have been master fishermen, skilled farmers cultivating the fertile lake bed, and probably exceptionally adept boat builders. A vibrant culture, perhaps even a proto-civilization, flourishing in relative isolation, unaware of the immense cataclysm that was brewing just beyond a narrow Bosporus ridge, a geological dam holding back an unimaginable force. Their world was rich, their life connected to the generous lake, their future seemingly secure. Yet, it was all poised on the brink of an irreversible, devastating change. If the Black Sea was indeed once this immense freshwater lake, a veritable Eden for human development, what force of nature could have transformed it so utterly and so swiftly? And what became of the people, the forgotten inhabitants of its verdant shores, whose entire world was destined to be swallowed by the rising, salty tide? The questions linger, whispering from the deep, inviting us to reconsider not just the geography of our planet, but the very narrative of human history itself, and the delicate balance upon which even thriving civilizations can rest. This is a story of profound loss, a cataclysm that rewrote geography and perhaps scattered the seeds of human memory across the ancient world. The idea of a lost world beneath the Black Sea may seem like a distant dream, a story whispered on the winds of forgotten ages. But what if the deep holds tangible proof? What if the very waters that once cradled a vibrant civilization now guard its silent, submerged ruins? It is here in the cold, dark embrace of the Black Sea's depths that modern expeditions have begun to uncover astonishing anomalies, challenging everything we thought we knew about early human habitation. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, pioneering oceanographers like Dr. Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the Titanic, turned their attention to the Black Sea. Using advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, his teams meticulously mapped vast swathes of the seafloor. What they discovered was far more intriguing than any shipwreck. They found what appeared to be ancient coastlines, remarkably well preserved beneath hundreds of feet of water. These were not mere geological features. They often included strangely regular, rectangular structures, some even revealing what looked like carefully placed wooden beams and stone foundations. These discoveries hinted at something impossibly massive, a settlement swallowed whole. The mainstream view, initially, was one of cautious skepticism. Perhaps these were natural rock formations, or debris from much later eras, misunderstood by the limitations of early deep-sea imaging. After all, the idea of ancient human structures at such depths was almost unthinkable to many. But there was a problem with this simple explanation. The structures exhibited a perplexing regularity, a geometric precision that seemed unnatural. Further investigation revealed tool marks on some of the submerged timbers, and the patterns of the structures aligned perfectly with what one might expect from a deliberately constructed settlement, not a random geological anomaly or a scattered wreck. These findings pushed against the conventional understanding of where and when early complex societies could have existed. Theories began to emerge, suggesting these were not just random finds, but the remnant of organized human activity, perhaps the very foundations of dwellings, walls, or even an ancient harbor built by a people living along the vast freshwater shoreline. Could it be that these structures are the ghost towns of time before the sea transformed? If so, what are these silent, submerged patterns truly reveal about their long-lost builders? As the expeditions continued, the finds grew more specific, more personal. Beyond the enigmatic structures, researchers began to unearth unambiguous evidence of daily human life. Pottery shards, meticulously crafted stone tools, and crucially, remnants of ancient hearths were discovered, sometimes within the very bounds of the identified structures. Imagine finding a circle of stones, blackened by fire, exactly where an ancient family might have gathered for warmth and sustenance. These were not isolated incidents. In certain areas, the density of such artifacts spoke volumes. The mainstream archaeological interpretation would typically question the context of such finds. Could they have been washed down from higher ground over millennia? Were they merely isolated objects, perhaps lost overboard from ancient boats traversing the later saltwater sea? But there was a critical flaw in this argument. Many of these artifacts were found in situ, meaning they were exactly where they were left, often buried under layers of sediment that precisely matched the geological markers of a rapid, cataclysmic flood event. The stratification of the sediment, the way the items were preserved, strongly suggested they had been quickly covered and undisturbed. These were not random deposits. They were the scattered belongings of community, a moment in time frozen by an overwhelming force. Theories started to shift, proposing that these were indeed clear indicators of a settled population, a people who built fires, cooked meals, and crafted tools by the shores of the ancient lake. Could it be that an entire way of life, with all its mundane routines and quiet rituals, was simply swallowed whole by the rising waters, leaving behind these poignant echoes of existence? What untold stories do these everyday objects whisper from their watery graves, begging us to listen? To truly grasp the significance of these finds, scientists relied on rigorous dating methodologies. Organic materials, such as preserved wood fragments from structures and charcoal from the ancient hearths, were carefully collected. These samples then underwent carbon-14 dating, a precise technique used to determine the age of organic matter. The results were startling. Consistently, the dates returned hovered around 7,500 to 8,000 years ago. This placed human activity in the Black Sea basin far earlier than many traditional historical timelines for complex societies in the region. The mainstream academic reaction often involves intense scrutiny of such dates. Questions arise about potential contamination of submerged materials or issues with calibration, especially when results challenge established historical narratives. There's a natural reluctance to accept dates that disrupt deeply held chronological frameworks. But there was a compelling consistency that defied easy dismissal. Multiple samples, taken from various locations across the submerged sites, using the most rigorous protocols, repeatedly returned dates within the same narrow window. These dates not only push back the timeline for organized human presence in the region, but, crucially, aligned almost perfectly with the proposed geological timing of the Great Flood event that transformed the Black Sea. If these dates are accurate, theories suggest they confirm human occupation of the Black Sea basin before it became a saltwater sea, implying a developed culture thriving during the freshwater lake period. Could it be that these precise dates are not anomalies, but hard evidence, forcing us to redefine the very age of human civilization in this part of the world, suggesting a more ancient and sophisticated past than previously imagined? The journey from initial interpretations to a broader acceptance of these challenging archaeological findings has been a slow one. Early reports of structures and artifacts beneath the Black Sea were met with considerable skepticism from the wider archaeological community, a natural caution when faced with claims that overturn established paradigms. The conventional view firmly held that sophisticated settlements and early advancements in agriculture primarily arose in specific fertile regions like Mesopotamia, much later than the dates suggested by the Black Sea discoveries. A lost civilization beneath the sea, especially one predating many known early farming communities, simply did not fit neatly into this framework. But there has been a significant shift in perspective as more expeditions have returned, bringing with them not just tantalizing images, but tangible, dated artifacts. The cumulative evidence, gathered through meticulous sonar mapping, sophisticated ROV exploration, and direct sampling of sediment layers and organic materials, became increasingly coherent and harder to dismiss. The findings were no longer isolated incidents, but began to form a compelling, interconnected narrative of a flourishing, ancient community. The idea of a lost world beneath the black sea may seem like a distant dream, a story whispered on the winds of forgotten ages. But what if the deep holds tangible proof? What if the very waters that once cradled a vibrant civilization now guard its silent, submerged ruins? It is here in the cold, dark embrace of the Black Sea's depths that modern expeditions have begun to uncover astonishing anomalies, challenging everything we thought we knew about early human habitation. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, pioneering oceanographers like Dr. Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the Titanic, turned their attention to the Black Sea. Using advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, his teams meticulously mapped vast swathes of the seafloor. What they discovered was far more intriguing than any shipwreck. They found what appeared to be ancient coastlines, remarkably well preserved beneath hundreds of feet of water. These were not mere geological features. They often included strangely regular, rectangular structures. Some even revealed what looked like carefully placed wooden beams and stone foundations. These discoveries hinted at something impossibly massive, a settlement swallowed whole. The mainstream view, initially, was one of cautious skepticism. Perhaps these were natural rock formations, or debris from much later eras, misunderstood by the limitations of early deep-sea imaging. After all, the idea of ancient human structures at such depths was almost unthinkable to many. But there was a problem with this simple explanation. The structures exhibited a perplexing regularity, a geometric precision that seemed unnatural. Further investigation revealed tool marks on some of the submerged timbers, and the patterns of the structures aligned perfectly with what one might expect from a deliberately constructed settlement, not a random geological anomaly or a scattered wreck. These findings pushed against the conventional understanding of where and when early complex societies could have existed. Theories began to emerge, suggesting these were not just random finds, but the remnant of organized human activity, perhaps the very foundations of dwellings, walls, or even an ancient harbor built by a people living along the vast freshwater shoreline. Could it be that these structures are the ghost towns of time before the sea transformed? If so, what do these silent, submerged patterns truly reveal about their long-lost builders? As the expeditions continued, the finds grew more specific, more personal. Beyond the enigmatic structures, researchers began to unearth unambiguous evidence of daily human life. Pottery shards, meticulously crafted stone tools, and crucially, remnants of ancient hearths were discovered, sometimes within the very bounds of the identified structures. Imagine finding a circle of stones, blackened by fire, exactly where an ancient family might have gathered for warmth and sustenance. These were not isolated incidents. In certain areas, the density of such artifacts spoke volumes. The mainstream archaeological interpretation would typically question the context of such finds. Could they have been washed down from higher ground over millennia? Were they merely isolated objects, perhaps lost overboard from ancient boats traversing the later saltwater sea? But there was a critical flaw in this argument. Many of these artifacts were found in situ, meaning they were exactly where they were left, often buried under layers of sediment that precisely matched the geological markers of a rapid, cataclysmic flood event. The stratification of the sediment, the way the items were preserved, strongly suggested they had been quickly covered and undisturbed. These were not random deposits. They were the scattered belongings of community, a moment in time frozen by an overwhelming force. Theories started to shift, proposing that these were indeed clear indicators of a settled population, a people who built fires, cooked meals, and crafted tools by the shores of the ancient lake. Could it be that an entire way of life, with all its mundane routines and quiet rituals, was simply swallowed whole by the rising waters, leaving behind these poignant echoes of existence? What untold stories do these everyday objects whisper from their watery graves, begging us to listen? To truly grasp the significance of these finds, scientists relied on rigorous dating methodologies. Organic materials, such as preserved wood fragments from structures and charcoal from the ancient hearths, were carefully collected. These samples then underwent carbon-14 dating, a precise technique used to determine the age of organic matter. The results were startling. Consistently, the dates returned hovered around 7,500 to 8,000 years ago. This placed human activity in the Black Sea basin far earlier than many traditional historical timelines for complex societies in the region. The mainstream academic reaction often involves intense scrutiny of such dates. Questions arise about potential contamination of submerged materials or issues with calibration, especially when results challenge established historical narratives. There's a natural reluctance to accept dates that disrupt deeply held chronological frameworks. But there was a compelling consistency that defied easy dismissal. Multiple samples, taken from various locations across the submerged sites, using the most rigorous protocols, repeatedly returned dates within the same narrow window. These dates not only push back the timeline for organized human presence in the region, but, crucially, align almost perfectly with the proposed geological timing of the Great Flood event that transformed the Black Sea. If these dates are accurate, theories suggest they confirm human occupation of the Black Sea basin before it became a saltwater sea, implying a developed culture thriving during the freshwater lake period. Could it be that these precise dates are not anomalies, but hard evidence, forcing us to redefine the very age of human civilization in this part of the world, suggesting a more ancient and sophisticated past than previously imagined? The journey from initial interpretations to a broader acceptance of these challenging archaeological findings has been a slow one. Early reports of structures and artifacts beneath the Black Sea were met with considerable skepticism from the wider archaeological community, a natural caution when faced with claims that overturn established paradigms. The conventional view firmly held that sophisticated settlements and early advancements in agriculture primarily arose in specific fertile regions like Mesopotamia, much later than the dates suggested by the Black Sea discoveries. A lost civilization beneath the sea, especially one predating many known early farming communities, simply did not fit neatly into this framework. But there has been a significant shift in perspective as more expeditions have returned, bringing with them not just tantalizing images, but tangible, dated artifacts. The cumulative evidence, gathered through meticulous sonar mapping, sophisticated ROV exploration, and direct sampling of sediment layers and organic materials, became increasingly coherent and harder to dismiss. The findings were no longer isolated incidents, but began to form a compelling, interconnected narrative. The prevailing scientific view often posits a relatively slow mixing process when two different bodies of water meet, especially through a narrow channel. One might expect a gradual increase in salinity over centuries, allowing freshwater and saltwater species to slowly adapt or be displaced. But the Black Sea tells a different story. The moment arises from the paleosalinity records, ancient salt content indicators, derived from microscopic organisms and geochemical analyses in sediment cores. These records show an incredibly sharp spike in salinity at the exact geological moment of the flood event. The freshwater organisms, which had thrived in the lake for thousands of years, vanished almost completely from the fossil record at this precise layer, replaced abruptly by marine species. This is not the slow adaptation of an ecosystem. It's an ecological turnover, a biological catastrophe. Alternative theories suggest that the inflowing Mediterranean water, denser and colder, would have plunged down into the deep Black Sea basin, displacing the lighter freshwater upwards. This created a dramatic, almost instantaneous stratification of the water column. The bottom layers became anoxic, devoid of oxygen, almost immediately, as organic matter from the suddenly drowned freshwater ecosystem decomposed without oxygen. This is why much of the deep Black Sea today remains anoxic, a unique characteristic among major seas. This sudden, massive introduction of salt water would have been an overwhelming shock to any freshwater life forms, leading to mass extinction for those unable to adapt or escape. Could it be that the very structure of the Black Sea's waters today, its deep, oxygen-starved layers, is a direct, frozen consequence of this singular, catastrophic event? The question remains, how quickly did the balance of nature in that vast basin tip? And what kind of world was lost in that swift, saline embrace? To truly grasp the scale of this catastrophe, scientists have turned to computer simulations. Using geological data, bathymetry, the mapping of the seabed, and hydrological principles, these models attempt to reconstruct the flood event. The results are breathtaking, painting a picture of a deluge almost unimaginable in its speed and volume. The initial understanding of such events might suggest a slow, creeping inundation, perhaps a few feet a year, giving inhabitants time to move to higher ground, or at least to observe the impending disaster over generations. But the simulations offer a starkly different reality. Here's the critical moment. The model suggests that once the Bosporus breach occurred, the Mediterranean waters would have poured into the Black Sea basin with incredible force and speed. Estimates suggest that at its peak, the water could have flowed at a rate hundreds of times greater than Niagara Falls, perhaps as much as 200 or even 400 cubic kilometers per day. This torrent would have advanced across the lower-lying freshwater basin at speeds that would make escape impossible for any settlements caught in its path. Imagine a wall of water, moving inland at several kilometers an hour, relentlessly expanding the shoreline by up to a kilometer per day in some flatter regions. Over a period of months, or perhaps a year, the freshwater lake, already immense, would have expanded dramatically, its shorelines receding rapidly as the basin filled to its current levels. Alternative simulations explore the varying topography of the ancient Black Sea basin. Where the land was steep, the water might have risen rapidly but not advanced far inland. In flatter region, however, the water would have spread like an unstoppable tide, engulfing vast swathes of previously habitable land. This scenario implies that any communities living on the ancient shores would face not a slow, visible rise, but a swift, terrifying inundation. The sheer scale of the water's advance suggests that entire communities, their homes, their fields, and their way of life would have been swallowed by the encroaching sea in a matter of weeks or months. Could it be that these simulations are not merely abstract models, but echoes of a living nightmare for those who witnessed the flood firsthand? The question remains, what kind of human ingenuity or warning systems, if any, could prepare people for such an overwhelming, rapid transformation of their entire world? The ultimate impact of this great deluge was a complete and irreversible transformation of the ancient Black Sea basin environment. From a vibrant, flourishing freshwater ecosystem, it became the unique, stratified, and largely anoxic body of salt water we recognize today. This shift was more than just a change in water chemistry. It was an ecological reset button. For centuries, the mainstream view of oceanography and limnology tended to see such large-scale environmental changes as results of long-term climate cycles or gradual geological shifts, allowing for slow evolutionary adaptation and migration. The Black Sea, in this traditional lens, might have just slowly evolved into its current state. But what moment here is critical. The evidence of a rapid, catastrophic flood dramatically alters this perspective. The sudden inundation of salt water would have had immediate and devastating consequences for the freshwater flora and fauna that had adapted to the unique conditions of the ancient lake. Fish species, mollusks, aquatic plants, all would have been subjected to an instant change in salinity that most could not tolerate. The massive amount of organic matter from the drowned terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems, suddenly submerged and decomposed without oxygen, would have accelerated the formation of the anoxic deep layers. This process created a unique environment where preservation is extraordinary, but life, as we know it, is largely absent below a certain depth. Alternative perspectives suggest that this cataclysm not only destroyed an ecosystem, but essentially embalmed it. The anoxic conditions, while hostile to most life, are incredible preservers of organic material. Shipwrecks from classical antiquity, for example, have been found remarkably intact in the Black Sea's anoxic depths, their wooden structures, and even organic cargo perfectly preserved for millennia. This suggests that beneath the layers of salt water, buried within the muds of the ancient lake bed, could lie the incredibly preserved remnants of the very civilization that witnessed this flood. The transition wasn't just an ecological shift. It was a geological time capsule being sealed. Could it be that the very catastrophe that wiped out a world also preserved its secrets, awaiting discovery in the silent, lightless depths? The question lingers, what stories, what artifacts, what evidence of human ingenuity might still be hidden within those anoxic layers, waiting to be revealed and rewrite our understanding of early human history? The evidence of catastrophic deluge, so profound it reshaped an entire inland sea, compels us to look beyond the geological record. It forces us to ask, what if humanity remembered? What if the echoes of such an event resonate not just in the silent depths, but in the most ancient stories ever told, across continents and millennia? From the arid lands of Mesopotamia to the lush jungles of the Americas, a striking common thread weaves through the tapestry of human history. Almost every culture, separated by vast oceans and impossible distances, possesses a tale of a great flood. These ancient whispers, passed down through generations, speak of a world drowned, of humanity nearly wiped clean, and of a chosen few who survived to restart civilization. For centuries, these universal flood myths were largely viewed as independent cultural developments, perhaps inspired by localized river floods or simply as allegories designed to teach moral lessons about divine wrath or human hubris. The mainstream belief often treats them as separate narrative traditions, with their similarities attributed to the universal human experience of powerful water or the need for a creation myth. Yet, the sheer universality and the often uncanny details shared between these tales begins to contradict a purely independent origin. Could it truly be a coincidence that so many disparate cultures conjure such a precise and devastating scenario? The sheer number and consistency of these narratives, often describing a global cataclysm, presents a puzzle that goes beyond simple allegory. But there is a compelling problem with this explanation: the depth of similarity. Extending far beyond the basic concept of a large body of water suggests a deeper, more primal memory. It's not just a flood. It's a specific sequence of events, a warning, the building of a vessel, the saving of animals, the rain for many days, the sending of birds to test the waters, and a new beginning. What if these widespread stories are not mere coincidences, but fragmented recollections of a single, devastating historical event? What if the geological catastrophe that transformed the Black Sea, which we've explored in detail, was that very event etching itself into the nascent consciousness of humanity? Some researchers believe that the Black Sea flood, with its immense scale and rapid inundation of a populated basin, provide a powerful candidate for the original deluge narrative. Theories suggest that survivors, displaced and scattered, carried this dramatic memory across the globe, seeding what will become the foundational myths of countless civilizations. It's a profound thought that the tales children hear today might be distant echoes of an ancient world's end. If the Black Sea flood was indeed this primordial deluge, how did its terrifying memory spread so far, across languages and cultures, to become a cornerstone of human mythology? Consider the most famous of these stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh, penned in ancient Mesopotamia, tells of Utnapishtim, forewarned by the gods, building an ark to save his family and all living creatures from a great flood. Then, there's a meticulously detailed account of Noah's Ark in the Hebrew Bible, where Noah builds a massive vessel, gathers pairs of animals, and survives a 40-day and 40-night deluge sent by a vengeful god. The mainstream academic view has often noted the literary parallels between these two accounts, suggesting a cultural transmission within the ancient Near East, where the Gilgamesh epic may have influenced later biblical narratives. However, this perspective primarily focuses on the literary lineage, rather than exploring a common historical genesis for the event itself. It typically maintains that these stories are rooted in regional river floods, common in the Mesopotamian plain, or are theological constructs. But there's a profound challenge of viewing these as merely localized legends or literary borrowings. The striking parallels go beyond mere plot points. They include specific, almost identical narrative elements: the divine warning, the construction of a large, multi-deck vessel, the sealing of its door, the inclusion of all species of animals, the specific duration of the storm and subsequent receding waters, and the ritualistic sending out of birds, first a dove, then a swallow, then a raven to find dry land. This level of detail, replicated across vastly different belief systems, seems too intricate for independent invention, or even casual cultural diffusion from a regional river flood. The sheer scope of the destruction described in both myths, a world entirely submerged, forcing a complete restart, aligns far more closely with monumental, basin-altering event like the Black Sea flood than with even the most devastating of river overflows. Could it be that a single cataclysmic event, one that irrevocably altered the landscape and extinguished a thriving civilization, became the terrifying prototype for these universal narratives? Some scholars propose that the survivors of the Black Sea deluge, scattered by the encroaching waters, carried their first-hand accounts to new lands. As they integrated into existing cultures or formed new ones, their traumatic memories were woven into the fabric of local storytelling, morphing and adapting, but retaining the core, indelible blueprint of the catastrophe. This theory suggests that the stories of Noah and Utnapishtim, rather than being purely allegorical or localized, are remarkably preserved echoes of a real event. If these myths are indeed reflections of the Black Sea catastrophe, what does that tell us about the extraordinary power of human memory and the resilience of storytelling? The persistence of these stories, passed down over thousands of years and across immense geographical and linguistic divides, represents an anomaly in itself. How does such a profoundly traumatic event get encoded and transmitted with such fidelity in its core details over such vast periods? Traditional views of oral tradition acknowledge its fluidity, its capacity for transformation and adaptation as stories pass from generation to generation. While cultural memory is powerful, it is also often seen as susceptible to embellishment, omission, and localization, making the survival of such precise commonalities across continents a significant puzzle. The conventional wisdom often suggests that over millennia, such detailed accounts would naturally diverge far more dramatically. But there is a critical distinction to be made. The Black Sea flood was not merely a significant historical event. It was an apocalyptic transformation of an entire world. The sudden, relentless rise of the waters, described by geologists, would not have been a slow, manageable process, but a terrifying inundation, forcing rapid flight and witnessing complete obliteration of familiar landscapes and ways of life. Perhaps the sheer magnitude of this cataclysm burned an indelible flashbulb memory into the collective consciousness of the survivors. This was not just a bad season. It was the end of their known world, an event so utterly profound it became the ultimate reference point for destruction and rebirth. Could it be that the trauma itself acted as a preservative, ensuring that the core narrative, the how to survive guide for the end of the world, was meticulously passed down? Researchers ponder whether survivors, carrying this deep-seated fear and knowledge, migrated in various directions. As they spread, they carried their terrifying narrative, integrating into diverse communities, from the Fertile Crescent to distant shores. What if the very act of storytelling became a survival mechanism, a way to process the incomprehensible and warn future generations? This continuous retelling, sanctified by its devastating origin, might have ensured the longevity and widespread diffusion of the deluge myth, creating an unwritten historical record preserved in the cultural DNA of humanity. What other lost histories, passed down through myth and legend, might be waiting for us to uncover and reconnect with scientific evidence? Beyond the physical water, beyond the mechanics of survival, the universal flood myths carry a deep emotional and societal resonance. They are not merely tales of destruction, but often narratives of moral reckoning, divine judgment, and profound psychological reset. Many myths speak of humanity's wickedness preceding the flood, or the survivors being chosen for their piety, leading to a new, purified world. These moral and religious aspects have traditionally been interpreted as allegorical, designed to instill values, explain human suffering, or reflect universal philosophical truths, rather than being tied to a specific historical event. They are seen as the evolving consciousness of humanity, grappling with its own nature and the powers beyond its control. But there is a compelling reason to reconsider the separation between allegory and event. If the Black Sea flood was indeed the historical trigger for these narratives, then these moral and societal themes take on an entirely new, visceral meaning. The destruction of an entire, vibrant civilization, a sudden and total annihilation of their world, would not just be a physical disaster. It would be a spiritual, psychological, and societal trauma of unimaginable proportions. Such an event would force a complete reevaluation of humanity's place in the cosmos, fostering new religious beliefs, new social structures, and a desperate search for meaning in the face of utter devastation. Could the fear of such an event recurring, the indelible memory of divine-like wrath in the waters, have led to the codification of moral frameworks and societal rules intended to prevent such a cataclysm again? Perhaps the moral decay depicted in some myths wasn't just a literary device, but a reflection of profound guilt and fear that survivors might have felt, seeking to understand why such a horror befell them. The shared trauma might have forged new bonds among the dispersed survivors, influencing the development of early social cohesion and religious practices that stressed obedience, righteousness, and humility. It's a powerful thought to consider how the psychological impact of the Black Sea flood might have laid the foundation for some of humanity's most fundamental spiritual and ethical understandings, shaping the very fabric of our earliest societies. If the Black Sea flood indeed forged these fundamental narratives and shaped the early human psyche, how deeply does its memory still resonate in our collective unconscious? Even today, the echoes of a great flood resonate through the oldest stories, but these myths whisper not just of water, but of people. People who lived, loved, and built their world along the shores of that ancient freshwater sea. Who were they, this lost civilization? What did their lives truly look like before the waters came? This is perhaps the most profound question that rises from the depths of the Black Sea, a mystery as vast as the ocean itself. For conventional history offers us little more than blank pages for this period, leaving us to piece together the characteristics of a society that vanished without a trace, swallowed by a geological event. The mainstream view of this era, spanning the late Neolithic into the early Chalcolithic, typically envisioned small, scattered communities. These were often transient hunter-gatherers or rudimentary farmers just beginning to scratch a living from the earth. Settlements were thought to be modest, technology basic, and social structures relatively simple, focused on family or tribal units. The idea of anything resembling a sophisticated, widespread society, much less one capable of thriving for millennia and then leaving such profound mythical footprint, is often met with skepticism when placed in such an early time frame. But there is a compelling argument against this simple picture. The geological record, combined with the archaeological evidence found in submerged contexts, paints a different canvas. Imagine a vast, fertile freshwater basin, far larger than any lake today, fed by major rivers. This environment would have been a veritable paradise, providing an unparalleled abundance of fish, fowl, game, and lush vegetation. Such consistent, rich resources for thousands of years would not only allow for but actively encourage population growth, stability, and the development of more complex ways of living. This was not a harsh, challenging landscape, but a bountiful one, ripe for human ingenuity. Theories suggest that this pre-Diluvian society might have developed an advanced form of what we now call a proto-civilization. Instead of scattered, isolated groups, perhaps interconnected networks of substantial villages flourished along the extensive coastline. Some researchers believe these communities could have developed specialized roles. Expert fishermen, skilled craftspeople working with wood, bone, and reeds, or perhaps early agriculturalists tending small plots near the river mouths. What if the stable water levels for thousands of years allowed for permanent settlements that grew into something akin to early towns, fostering a density of population and interaction not seen elsewhere until much later? It is plausible that their development, driven by resource abundance rather than scarcity, took a different trajectory, leading to a unique societal structure perfectly adapted to their watery world. We are left to wonder just how far their development truly reached before the world shifted around them. The very concept of coastal living in such a unique environment also presents an anomaly to our understanding of early human settlement patterns. Our typical models for early human habitation focus on terrestrial resource management. However, this ancient Black Sea society lived by and on a colossal freshwater lake. The mainstream assumption is that any interaction with this immense lake would have been rudimentary. Simple fishing, perhaps some basic gathering along the shores. Early communities are often depicted as passively utilizing resources, not actively managing or optimizing them on a grand scale. This perspective suggests a minimal impact on an adaptation to such a large body of water, implying that the lake was simply a backdrop, not the central pillar of their existence. But this interpretation overlooks the profound influence of living on the edge of such a vital, life-giving body of water. For a society existing over millennia, the freshwater Black Sea would have been more than just a resource. It would have been their entire world. The stability of the lake level for such an extended period would have fostered an intimate and sophisticated relationship with its rhythms. Could it be that they developed incredibly advanced fishing technologies, perhaps complex weir systems or large-scale net fisheries that far surpass what we attribute to this era? What if they practiced early forms of aquaculture, managing specific fish populations or cultivating aquatic plants for food and materials? Some speculate they built durable, sophisticated boats, not merely rafts, to navigate the vast expanses of the lake for trade, communication, and extended foraging expeditions. Their entire culture, from diet to housing, clothing to spiritual beliefs, would have been inextricably linked to the lake, making them a truly unique hydrocentric civilization. How did they sustainably thrive for so long in an environment that seemed limitless, yet undoubtedly demanded respect and careful stewardship? Moving deeper into the characteristics of this lost society, we must consider the potential for complex social structures and technological capabilities far beyond what is typically assigned to the Neolithic or early Chalcolithic periods. Our established historical narratives generally place the emergence of hierarchical societies, specialized labor, and advanced tool use firmly within the context of the agricultural revolution, followed by the Bronze and Iron Ages. Large-scale social organization, beyond kinship groups, is usually linked to the demands of intensive farming or early urban centers, requiring the management of surpluses and complex infrastructure. But the evidence, however scarce, from the submerged sites challenges this linear progression. The sheer longevity of this hypothesized society in such a rich environment would have naturally encouraged greater population density. This density, in turn, often necessitates more organized social structures to manage communal resources, resolve disputes, and coordinate activities like large-scale fishing or construction. Could it be that they develop a form of social stratification, perhaps based on skill, knowledge, or age, rather than conquest or land ownership? Theories range from highly cooperative, egalitarian societies with complex communal decision-making processes to chiefdoms or early forms of priestly leadership that guided their communities in harmony with the lake's bounty. What if their technology, while primarily lithic and organic, was exceptionally refined? Imagine intricate bone tools, advanced woodworking for shelters and boats, expertly woven textiles from plant fibers, or even early, sophisticated pottery forms used for storage and cooking. Their ingenuity would have been a direct product of their unique environment, allowing for advancements that simply aren't accounted for in our standard historical models. Without the benefit of written language, how do they coordinate these complex tasks and transmit such specialized knowledge across generations, ensuring the survival and growth of their unique culture? Ultimately, the most baffling aspect of the civilization is its abrupt disappearance and the stark lack of conventional historical records. In the standard archaeological narrative, societies either decline gradually, leaving layers of occupational debris, or are conquered, leaving evidence of conflict and a successor culture. For preliterate societies, the lack of written records is common, but their material culture, settlement patterns, and burial sites usually persist as tangible links to their past. But the Black Sea Society presents a chilling exception. We know that a cataclysmic flood occurred, a rapid, overwhelming event. This wasn't a slow decline. It was a sudden annihilation of a specific environment. The mainstream historical framework often struggles with such gaps, labeling them prehistoric or unknown. The lack of traditional historical records for this specific society means that, to many, they simply didn't exist in a coherent, identifiable form. Their story is left to the realm of geological data and myth. However, the very nature of the flood event offers an alternative explanation for this void. Could be that for those who live closest to the encroaching waters, the disappearance was total and instantaneous, leaving no time for a planned evacuation or the preservation of their material culture. Some researchers believe that rather than gradual migration, many perished in the deluge, their homes and lives swallowed by the relentless rise of the salt water. For any survivors, the trauma would have been immense. Scattered survivors fleeing in every direction, carrying only what they could, their collective memories shattered and fragmented. What if the lack of historical records is not a sign of their insignificance, but a testament to the absolute devastation of their world? Their story wasn't written down because the very people who lived it were scattered or silenced, leaving only the deep waters to hold their secrets. What truly happened to these people in their final, terrifying moments as the fresh water turned to salt and the familiar world disappeared beneath the waves? The mystery of this pre-Diluvian society, thriving for millennia in an environment now lost beneath the waves, remains a profound challenge to our understanding of early human history. It forces us to reconsider what was possible in the dim past, pushing the boundaries of Neolithic capability and societal complexity. The scale of the loss, a vibrant culture swallowed whole, is immense. Yet, the story does not end with a flood, for surely some survived. And those survivors, carrying their memories, skills, and perhaps even their spiritual beliefs, would have carried them to new lands, becoming the seeds of future societies, forever changed by the Great Deluge. The Great Deluge had rendered the fertile shores of the ancient freshwater lake uninhabitable, silencing the builders of that unique inland sea. But where did its people go? Did a thriving society simply vanish beneath the waves, or did its inhabitants scatter, carrying their knowledge and heritage to new lands? The questions linger like mists over the darkened waters. For centuries, archaeologists and historians have pondered the origins of sudden population surges and cultural advancements observed across vast swaths of early Neolithic Europe and Anatolia. In regions previously thought to have developed slowly, we see puzzling evidence of abrupt shifts. Mainstream explanations often attribute these developments to gradual indigenous innovation or slow, steady migrations over many generations. The assumption is continuous organic evolution of local cultures, slowly adapting to their environments and trading ideas. But there's a problem with this neatly ordered view of history. The timing of some of these cultural explosions aligns uncannily with the period immediately following the Black Sea flood event. We see rapid increases in population density and the sudden appearance of sophisticated technologies and practices in areas that, just centuries before, showed little sign of such progress. It suggests not a slow evolution, but a concentrated displacement, an urgent movement of people forced to seek new homes, bringing with them a ready-made suite of advancements. Could it be that those who once thrived by the freshwater Black Sea were not annihilated, but rather became the catalyst for a new dawn across surrounding regions? Some researchers believe that survivors, traumatized but resilient, fled in every direction, seeking refuge on higher ground. Imagine thousands of people, highly skilled in agriculture, resource management, and perhaps early forms of social organization, suddenly dispersing. Theories range from mass movements into the Balkans, pushing westward into what will become Europe, to migration south into Anatolia, and eastward towards the Caucasian mountains. These were not small bands of hunter-gatherers, but potentially the remnants of a highly organized proto-civilization. Their arrival would have been a shockwave, a sudden infusion of new ideas and methods that jump-started nascent communities. What if these displaced people carried not just their families, but the very seeds of advanced culture planting them across a continent? The spread of agricultural techniques and cultural innovations offers another compelling riddle. Suddenly, sophisticated farming methods, specialized toolmaking, and unique pottery styles seem to emerge and propagate with surprising speed. Traditional archaeological models suggest that such innovation spread slowly through gradual exchange between neighboring groups. However, certain periods show what looks like an accelerated diffusion, almost as if an entire cultural package was delivered rather than slowly passed along. The mainstream perspective points to the independent invention of agriculture in multiple cradles around the globe, with gradual diffusion from these centers. They propose that shared challenges led to similar solutions, or that slow trade routes facilitated the spread of ideas over centuries. But the evidence in places like the Fertile Crescent, the Balkans, and parts of Eastern Europe often reveals a more complex picture. Specific types of domesticated plants and animals, unique ceramic designs, and even architectural styles appear in new regions without obvious local predecessors. It's as if a highly developed agricultural system, coupled with the necessary cultural knowledge to sustain it, suddenly arrived almost fully formed. Could the refugees from the Black Sea, accustomed to the rich resources and advanced practices of their submerged homeland, have carried this expertise with them, effectively fast-forwarding development in less advanced societies? What if these survivors were not just carrying basic seeds, but a sophisticated understanding of irrigation, crop rotation, and perhaps even forms of animal husbandry that were far ahead of the indigenous groups they encountered? Theories suggest that the Black Sea Basin, with its unparalleled freshwater resources and fertile lands, was a prime environment for early agricultural innovation, even perhaps predating or running parallel to developments in Mesopotamia. The sudden influx of these skilled agriculturalists could have transformed entire regions, leading to the rapid establishment of settled communities and a boom in food production. If so, then the destruction of one civilization might have directly fostered the birth of many others. The impact of such migrations on surrounding regions and the very foundations of early European civilizations is a profound area of speculation. As people fled the rising waters, they would have carried their societal structures, their customs, and their collective memory to new territories. We see curious cultural shifts in population dynamics across regions like the Balkans, the Carpathian Basin, and the Anatolian Plateau. Mainstream history often attributes these developments to internal societal evolution, pressure from neighboring tribes, or local environmental changes. The narrative is usually one of gradual, localized development, with external influences playing a secondary role. But when we consider the scale of the Black Sea flood, the displacement of potentially hundreds of thousands of people, the impact cannot be understated. These weren't just random individuals. They were the remnants of community. Theories propose that these organized groups, possessing advanced knowledge and perhaps even a shared sense of identity forged by catastrophe, could have acted as powerful stimuli for the development of new, complex societies. Could the infusion of their expertise have been the driving force behind the megalithic cultures of early Europe, or the rapid rise of early proto-states in Anatolia? Some researchers even go further, suggesting that the Black Sea survivors might have carried with them certain specialized skills, perhaps in metallurgy or advanced pottery, which then rapidly disseminated throughout the regions they settled. Imagine a group arriving in a new land, bringing with them knowledge of how to work copper or create more durable ceramics, skills that would have been revolutionary for local, less developed populations. The presence of sophisticated metalworking techniques, for example, appearing seemingly out of nowhere in early European sites, often leaves archaeologists puzzled. Could this be the legacy of a people who had developed these skills in their thriving Black Sea homeland before its submergence? The possibility forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of innovation and cultural exchange in ancient Europe, placing the Black Sea survivors at its heart. The very fabric of our heritage, our genes and our languages, might also hold whispers of this ancient catastrophe. The study of genetic haplogroups and linguistic family trees presents fascinating puzzles regarding human migration and dispersal. We observe distinct genetic markers and linguistic roots that appear in regions far from their suspected points of origin, sometimes with unusual concentrations. The mainstream explanation often involves long-distance trade, gradual intermarriage over millennia, or very deep, branching linguistic family trees that trace back to a single, ancient common ancestor. These models typically posit slow, organic processes of genetic and linguistic diffusion. But certain genetic patterns, particularly some Y chromosome haplogroups and mitochondrial DNA lineages, show distribution patterns that are difficult to explain by slow, continuous migration alone. They suggest sudden, concentrated dispersal events. Similarly, the origins and spread of language families, particularly Proto-Indo-European, have long been debated, with various theories linking its dispersal to agriculture or specific migrations. Could the Black Sea flood provide a missing piece to this complex puzzle? Theories now explore the possibility that the diaspora of Black Sea flood survivors, carrying their unique genetic makeup and their language, profoundly influenced the genetic and linguistic landscape of early Europe and Anatolia. As they integrated with existing populations or established new settlements, they would have introduced their genes and their forms of communication. Could the Black Sea event be a critical, underappreciated factor in the spread of certain genetic lineages, or even contribute to the origins and dispersal of Proto-Indo-European languages, whose mysterious origins have captivated scholars for centuries? If this is true, then our very biology and the words we speak today might carry ancient echoes of a cataclysmic flood, a collective memory embedded within our DNA and our speech. Ultimately, the Black Sea, in its previous incarnation as a vast freshwater lake, emerges as a potential crucible for early human development, a place of extraordinary innovation whose true significance has been largely overlooked. For much of modern history, the primary cradles of civilization have been identified as Mesopotamia, the Nile Valley, and the Mediterranean Basin. These regions are rightly lauded for their contributions to early human advancement, their rich archaeological records providing clear evidence of burgeoning complexity. But there's a powerful argument to be made that the pristine, resource-rich environment of the Black Sea Basin, before its transformation, offered an equally fertile ground for human ingenuity. The sheer abundance of freshwater fish, the extensive coastal plains ideal for early agriculture, and its strategic location connecting different geographical zones, made a prime location for a burgeoning proto-civilization. Yet, Because its primary evidence now lies submerged, its story remains largely untold by mainstream archaeology. Could be that the Black Sea was not just a cradle, but the cradle for many fundamental innovations that then spread across the ancient world. What if this lost inland sea was a melting pot of cultural exchange, a vibrant hub of agricultural and technological advancement that was tragically interrupted? The remnants of its people, forced to flee, would have carried not just their skills, but the essence of a unique, thriving civilization. Their survival and their subsequent impact on surrounding cultures might represent one of the most significant, yet least understood, chapters in human history. The waters may have claimed their physical legacy, but did the survivors ensure that their spirit and knowledge lived on, shaping the world we know today in ways we are only just beginning to comprehend? The stories held by these deep waters, the narratives of adaptation and migration we've just considered, begin to paint a picture that forces a profound reevaluation. For generations, our understanding of human history has followed a clear, linear path. We've traced the slow, steady ascent from scattered hunter-gatherer groups to the first farming communities, then to the grand civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, often seen as the undisputed cradles of complex society. This traditional timeline, neatly ordered and largely accepted, suggests a measured progression, a predictable unfolding of human ingenuity over millennia. But the implications of a thriving civilization, a sophisticated culture potentially dwelling within the ancient Black Sea basin, introduce an elegant puzzle to this tidy chronology. What if complex societies emerged not just once, in a singular, celebrated location, but in multiple, forgotten places across the globe? Could pockets of advanced living, with intricate social structures, and perhaps even proto-technologies, have blossomed and faded long before history's conventional spotlight began to shine? Some researchers now whisper of an entirely different narrative, one where the seeds of civilization were sown far earlier and in far more diverse soils than we ever imagined. The traditional timeline, some suggest, might be a mere fragment of a much larger, more intricate story. This profound reimagining leads us to ask, if such a sophisticated culture could rise and fall, erased by a sudden, devastating deluge in the Black Sea, what other lost worlds might lie hidden beneath the waves of our planet? Our gaze often turns to land, to deserts and mountain peaks, in search of ancient ruins. Yet, the vast liquid expanses of Earth remain largely unexplored, guarding secrets that could rewrite maps and textbooks alike. Mainstream archaeology, for all its wonders, has historically focused on accessible sites, visible cities, and burial mounds rising from the soil. But the Black Sea's silent revelations compel us to consider a staggering what-if. What if the end of the last ice age, a period marked by dramatic sea level rise, didn't just inundate coastlines, but swallowed entire thriving regions? The Persian Gulf, for instance, was once a fertile valley, a potential haven for early human settlement. The North Sea, known as Doggerland, connected Britain to continental Europe with vast, habitable plains. Could these and other submerged landscapes conceal not just scattered artifacts, but the remains of entire civilizations, waiting to be discovered? Theories suggest that rapid geological shifts could preserve these sites under layers of sediment, creating veritable time capsules, much like the Black Sea. The thought conjures images of Atlantis, a mythical echo that suddenly feels less like pure fantasy and more like a collective memory, perhaps distorted over millennia. The challenge, of course, lies in the immense difficulty of finding and studying these deep, dark secrets. For decades, the quest for submerged evidence has been hampered by technological limitations, a vast ocean, and the sheer expense of deep-sea exploration. It has been a meticulous, slow-paced endeavor, often relying on serendipitous discoveries or focused yet limited expeditions. But the relentless march of human innovation is beginning to pierce the veil. New generations of remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, equipped with high-resolution sonar and sub-bottom profilers, allow us to see through layers of water and sediment with unprecedented clarity. Imagine sophisticated autonomous underwater vehicles, silently mapping vast swathes of seabed, searching for anomalies. Collaborative efforts between marine geologists who understand the ancient topography and archaeologists who recognize human fingerprints are forging new paths. Could this synergy, powered by ever-advancing technology, be on the cusp of unlocking not just one, But many more Black Sea level mysteries? What undiscovered knowledge? What irrefutable proof awaits us just beyond the reach of our current gaze? This ongoing quest is more than a search for artifacts. It's a fundamental challenge to the very concept of linear historical progression. For so long, our textbooks have presented human development as a steady, upward climb, each era building logically upon the last, culminating in our present modern world. It's a comforting, progressive narrative, suggesting an unbroken chain of advancement. But the specter of a lost Black Sea civilization, a sophisticated culture utterly wiped from the surface of the earth, introduces a stark counter-narrative. What a history is not a steady, unbroken line, but a series of dramatic peaks and valleys, of glorious rises and catastrophic falls. Some historians and theorists now ponder the idea of civilization resets, moments where advanced knowledge is lost, populations are scattered, and humanity is forced to begin anew, perhaps carrying only fragments of forgotten past. Could these lost chapters explain sudden leaps in technology or culture found in later, seemingly unconnected civilizations? Does the Black Sea's hidden story force us to accept a more cyclical view of human progress, where brilliance can be extinguished and reignited, rather than simply evolving? This questioning of our linear past hold profound implications for how we understand our origins, and perhaps even more critically, our enduring resilience as a species. The very existence of survivors, carrying their traditions and knowledge to new lands after a cataclysm, speaks volumes about the human spirit. But beyond mere survival, consider the deep psychological and societal impact of such a flood. If memories of a lost world were passed down through generations, subtly shaping myths and cultural practices, then our origins are not just a matter of geography and technology, but of deep-seated collective trauma and heroic adaptation. What if the Black Sea flood isn't just a single event, but a template for understanding humanity's capacity to rebuild, to innovate, and to adapt in the face of truly world-altering disasters? Could the genetic memory of this great deluge be woven into the very fabric of our being, influencing our choices even today? The waters remember, not just the shape of the land they cover, but the stories of the people who once walked upon it. And in remembering, they compel us to rethink everything we thought we knew about our incredible, bewildering, and ultimately unwritten past. The quest continues, not just for lost cities, but for a fuller, richer understanding of who we are and where we truly come from.